And we're golden. Sweet guys, welcome to FEDM, Front End Developers of Miami. I guess now it is Front End Miami for short. Also, yay, first meetup in a couple months, almost not a year, but first proper meetup in a year. That doesn't count happy hours. First totally virtual meetup. So sweet. Thanks. So glad you guys can make it. So we are a meetup for front-end developers. My name is Ernie. I do not know if Charles or Chris are. I know Chris is on for sure, but Charles. Yeah, easy. Awesome. We are. They are the co-hosts. I don't know if y'all want to say anything, but okay. Otherwise, what else? Yeah, we meet. We're going to try to meet more regularly, and this goes well, and it looks like it's going pretty well so far. We'll do virtual talks more often. Props where props are due. We are using a Zoom Pro account, so I would be remiss if I didn't give proper proper acknowledgement to that. So our Zoom Pro is brought to you by WinCode. Full disclosure, I am the full stack web developer at WinCode. Obviously, this is open for everyone in the public, code school or not, but props to them. The nice folks at WinCode have also asked me to also talk about awesome things that are going on, including their Refer a Friend program, which is the URL right there if you are interested. I won't go too much into detail, but WinCode. Okay, so that is, so here is how this is going to work. I see you laughing, Bruno, don't judge. The way this is going to work is that we are going to have a bunch of virtual lightning talks. Who here has heard of a lightning talk? Thumbs up if you have, shrugs if you haven't, stare at your screen blankly if you have. Okay, all good, right? So a virtual talk, for those that don't know, is you have 5 to 10 minutes to talk about literally anything. Given that this is a web development meetup, I hope your 5 to 10 minute things has something even remotely related to, wait for it, web development, right? I am going to ahead to kick it off, but we actually have a couple of awesome talks tonight. Let me share my screen one more time so I can show you guys. But yeah, this is the talks on deck for tonight. Folks from Victor, Scott, Rebecca, William, Jorge, I hope your name is right. I pronounced it right. I don't know if it's Jorge or George, and Andres. We'll have 5 to 10 minutes for talking, maybe 2 to 3 minutes for Q&As, and then if anyone has anything else to share after the meetup, awesome. Also props to Charles and Chris, who are going to act as kind of the co-hosts. What that means is that we are going to be inviting other peeps. So folks that are coming in, you may have noticed, has a waiting room. They are going to be bringing people into that waiting room. Full disclosure, we also have a code of conduct, which is kind of a standard thing. So anyone violating the code of conduct, they get put in the waiting room. It's just like internet purgatory, right? Okay, so any kind of general questions or announcements before we go ahead and start off with our first speaker? Okay, seeing none. Victor, are you ready to go, sir?
I am ready, yes.
Awesome.
Yeah,
okay.
Victor. Woo!
Okay.
Iron Pro.
Here is what I'm going to do. I'm going to put myself on mute shortly. I am going to put a timer in, 10 minutes on the clock. And Victor, the floor is yours.
Perfect. All right. So, like you guys probably heard, my name is Victor Fernandez, and in the next 10 minutes, we're going to be going over SAS, also known as CSS on steroids. Let's get started. So, you might have a couple questions in mind, like, what is it? Simply put, SAS, or as they call it, syntactically awesome style sheets, is a CSS preprocessor. Now, why should you use it? Because normal CSS does not allow for reusable code or logic, and in big projects, CSS code can become unmanageable after some time. 3,000 lines of CSS code doesn't is not easy to organize. So main features that SAS provides: first of all, imports and PowerShells. This allows you to separate your code into multiple files. Nesting, one of my favorite features, allows you to write less code and keep it organized by putting things inside of other selectors, and I'll go into more detail pretty soon. But then you also have variables, and you might say, Victor, CSS already has variables. Like, why would you need? Well, this SAS variables are actually better looking, like uh, with their syntax, and they also allow for better browser support. Like older browsers don't support CSS variables, and this, when you compile it, it's just the actual value. That's what ends up in the last CSS file. So you also have mixins, one of my favorite features because it allows you to reuse CSS code, and it can take parameters. So it's kind of like a function. And to have extents. This allows you to inherit code from other selectors. Operators allows you to do maths and conditional statements in the SAS file. So that's if you want to keep your code pretty really structured. You could do like the width of this divided by the width of that, and it's gonna make everything easier for you. And there's many more things which I can't cover in just 10 minutes. I will be sharing the document, the website for SAS at the end, so you guys can check that out. Now, there's three main ways to set it up. First one and easiest one is just VS Code, a VS Code extension called Live SAS Compiler. I actually found out about this as I was researching for the presentation. It's extremely easy to set up. You literally just click a button on the bottom of VS Code that says Watch SAS, and that's automatically gonna update and compile your code every time you refresh it or save it. I mean, then you could also install SAS globally by using that command right there in the terminal, and you can run it by just saying SAS -- watch, so it updates automatically where you want to compile your code from and where you want to compile your code to. And then you could also just install a package in your normal project, like over here, and you just make a script that says compile SAS, same concept as the other one. Just node SAS, where you want to compile from, where you want to compile to, -w, so it updates. Now, something that's kind of confusing for people that have never used SAS is that there's two main file extensions, two syntaxes. It's weird, but see it this way. So there's .sas and .scss. I'm gonna switch back and forth real quick so you guys can see the difference. So you can see .sas doesn't have any semicolons or curly braces. So imagine it like it's Python and CSS having a kid, and SCSS is like JavaScript and CSS having a kid. I guess that's the best way to see it. I personally prefer SCSS because it's easier to convert just normal CSS into SAS, because you don't need to get rid of anything. You just, add the nesting, just the variables and everything. So the first thing is imports and file structure. So when you're working on a big project, it's really good to keep everything organized by functionality and just use. So you could keep the abstracts, which would be variables, mixins, and functions, which SAS does have functions feature, but I'm not going to cover that now because it's too much, I think. But then there's also, you just put components in one place and everything just organized. And any of these that have an underscore before its name, that's called a partial. And to import a partial into the main file where you're going to be compiling the code from, the syntax is @ import, just / whatever path but notice that you don't need to type the underscore or the file type. And also, the order in which you import files does matter. So if you have like a variable inside of the header, you want to put that above, not below. Else it's going to throw an error. So then comes nesting. As you guys probably saw in the previous code samples that I showed. Sorry. There's this little ampersand symbol. When that ampersand symbol is inside of a block or curly braces, that's just going to be referencing the parent selector. So as you can see here, ampersand ul literally just translates to nav ul. Ampersand hover is referencing to this. This is referencing to this, and that's just nav ul hover. So that way you can see the power of this, and to actually utilize the whole feature of nesting in Sass, it's best to use CSS methodology called base element modifier. It's one of the most popular ones, at least one of the most useful ones in my opinion. And that's pretty much a way of naming your classes. Let's dive into that. So this is what they had on their website. You know, it's a highly useful, powerful, simple naming convention. But to keep it simple, here's an example. So you have nav class menu, that would be the block. And then the item itself would be the element, menu item. And you see how this one has the class menu item active? That's the modifier. That's gonna allow you to, over here, when you're nesting, just keep everything in one place together. So if you wanna change anything about the nav, it's all like right there. It's easier to type and everything. So really good way to name your classes. Then you have variables. Now Sass variables are simple. You just assign a value to a name that begins with a $sign, and then you can refer to that name instead of the value itself. But despite the simplicity, they are really useful. They're one of the most useful tools that they have, actually. So variables make it possible to reduce repetition, do complex math, configure libraries, and much more. Here's a basic example of what you could do. Just $, colon, whatever. And then down here, you just say $, and the variable name. And that's going to translate to this. Now, this is a little bit more you declare them using @mixin followed by the name, and you use it with @include followed by the name. So you can see over here. You could also pass arguments, or you could just not pass any arguments. However, I think to utilize the whole like power of mixins is better too, unless you don't need it, of course. So you have @mixin, the name would be replace text, parameters would be image, the X, the Y. This right here is a way to set a default value. So as you can see down here, when we actually call that mixin by saying @include, replace text, the first parameter is passed in here, the image. And that's going to be called here in the background. So as you can see in the actual CSS, that's the first parameter. Second parameter is just a 0. But we never provided a third one. Now, the X and the Y are used here in the position. And as you can see, it automatically defaults to 0 and 50, because that's the default. That's a really nice way to use these things. Here's a more simple example, or more common one. You have center flex as a mixin, and you pass in 2 parameters, direction, height, and then you have your basic centering, just display flags, yada yada yada. And down here, when you call that mixin, you say, okay, row 100 VH for the heading. For main, you say column 50 VH. And if you can see over here to the right, all this code is passed in from the mixin, but with these variables in here in place. Display flex direction row, height 100. Same thing goes for main. Flex direction column, height 50. And you might think, why not just type that out, copy paste? It can be a little bit tedious when you're in a really big project. Like maybe if you're doing like a 1-page thing just to like with a form, you might not need to implement all these things, but I would personally still use Sass because of nesting, but mixins are really, really useful for when you go ahead and do big projects. So then you could also get a little bit more complicated and start adding conditional statements in Sass, which is weird for some people, but it's really, really useful. I'm not going to go too in depth into it, but essentially, as you can see over here, you have @if, then the parameter, the value. So if breakpoint is equal to phone, return, media only screen, with the max width already defined, and then content. That's gonna be whatever's passed in inside of these curly braces. When you call that mixin and you pass a parameter, it's gonna run through these conditionals. First one, big desktop. Okay, so it's this one, and the content is gonna be whatever you pass inside. Hope that seems simple enough. Now, extend, one that I barely use honestly, but it's another feature that Sass provides. It's a way to copy all the styles from one selector to the other without having to like just do comma and change it up here, which allows you to like just add individual styles to that other selector. That's a small little thing. I barely use it, but it's there if you want it. And that's pretty much it. Hopefully I was under 10 minutes. I don't know if I went too fast, but if you guys have any questions, do not be shy to ask. I know I just like ran through this. So I here provided a couple links for you, just the documentation for Sass, documentation for BEM methodology, a Sass playground to see how Sass code is converted into CSS. Kind of like CodePen, but just for Sass. And then there's this really nice Udemy course, plugging in because I'm not sponsored, but Jonas Schmetman, he taught me a lot about advanced CSS and Sass, and it was a really useful course. And if you want to link up, connect with me, that's my LinkedIn. I want to thank you guys again. If you have any questions, hit me up.
Woo! Nice. Cool. Woo! Yeah, it's always tough when you're like trying to do a clap, right? Or like because it's all mute, everyone's muted, so it's just like that one silent clap.
Yeah.
Yay! We're all clapping. Anyone have any questions for Victor?
I know I went like really like just through these things, but hopefully you guys like see the benefits of using Sass. I mean, I didn't even cover half of the things that you could use, but if
was
you guys,
definitely really cool. There was a lot of things in there that I wish it would have had initially from the get-go, especially starting to learn. I'm like, oh, can I do this on CSS? And it's like, nope, sorry. It's a JavaScript thing. So that's pretty cool.
There's usually JavaScript workarounds, but if you just do it directly in the code and CSS, in Sass, it's even better.
Oh yeah.
I have like
Victor,
a question.
No, go Alexis.
You go first.
Okay, good, thanks. Quick question. You say that we could do like, additions, subtractions, multiplication. Can we do that, for example, can I subtract, let's say 100 view height minus, I don't know, 10 pixels? Can it translate to that, or need to translate it to the actual measurement that I'm using?
That is a really good question, and yes. So essentially, like the view height is gonna be like a specific amount of pixels at the end, right? So it's just gonna subtract from that. So whatever the view height, it would be a weird calculation to do. But if you feel like it gives like a specific structure to your website that you need, yeah, for sure.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
My quick question is, do you feel like it's a lot easier to create media queries with Sass because it looked that way, the way that you were doing that?
Yeah, let me share my screen real quick so you can see like the difference. So instead of actually just like writing all of this code, like the whole media only screen and max width and this, like the actual size of the screen, you just do include respond, pass in the parameter, and you just put the code inside. And you do this inside of the HTML itself or whatever like selector you want to edit. I haven't done a media query in a while. I just copy this and I just do the include. It's so much easier, honestly.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
Put me on.
Awesome. Any other questions?
Yeah, just curiosity.
Yeah.
I'm currently working on a project that the project just have one CSS file, and it's like 16,000 lines of code, and it is just CSS. I'm just curious about, is there a way or there's a tool that can that allows you to kind of migrate that CSS file to Sass or something like that?
That's a really good question because for like 16,000 lines, you would want a tool like that.
Yeah, it's
sure
like
that if we
going
do,
crazy.
I'm pretty sure that if we do a quick Google search, like we could find one. I personally don't know one. Like the only tool that I found out about while doing this presentation was that compiler. But there's gotta be like a decompiler or something like that that turns everything into SCSS. Personally, like if you do go, don't go into SAS, go into SCSS. And then, like use this. Maybe like the same creator for this has another extension or something like that.
I added a
But
link to
hopefully your
chat.
CSS code is commented and you could just like copy paste. But it's 16,000 lines, so that would be like if you do that, it would be like one big SCSS file, and I think it essentially would be the same. I have not heard of an extension like that, but that would be pretty cool. Not gonna lie.
Let's actually just hopefully enough put in a link in the chat to CSS to SAS, which is apparently set up as a Heroku app. Give that a shot. But yeah, you're right, because it is algorithmically compiled. I imagine there's a way, and that's probably one example of such a way.
Awesome.
Yeah, definitely do some research about it, just for curiosity.
Nice.
Cool,
Any
guys.
more questions?
All right.
Cool.
We are going to move on. Thank you so much, Victor. Sweet. All right, cool. So I am now up. All right, so in lieu of doing a full-on lightning talk, I am going to do like a micro lightning talk, which is only going to be 5 minutes and not 10, which is going to be totally okay, as I did not prep too much, but it's all right because my talk is not necessarily so much on the hard technical stuff as it is on a somewhat meta subject, right? Someone keep me honest and give me 5 minutes. I can also just give myself a timer, but all right, give me a second. I am just gonna set that up and tomato timer.
I got you. Go ahead.
Okay, sweet. So guys, my name's Ernie. I am the organizer of FETM, but as you guys probably figured out by now, I am also the front end web and full stack web development instructor at WinCode. We have some WinCode students here. Woo! I had asked the channel for suggestions, and someone actually brought up, why don't you just talk about how you, what you've learned about code teaching other people? And I'm like, okay, that is a legit thing, right? Biggest thing in a nutshell, right? I could ramble on for 10 minutes, but it all kind of boils down to this slide, which is if you want to know something like the back of your hand, you teach it to someone else. You kind of hear it from other people, right? You're like, oh, no, I'm serious, right? If you want to know something like the back of your hand, you really do teach it to someone else. And you kind of have to think about why that is the case. So to understand where I'm coming from, like I definitely came from environments like this, right? Meetup groups, speaking and doing presentations, of course, but kind of in a community-based manner, right? Where the biggest thing I learned was how to properly teach. And when I say properly teach, you know, it's you kind of, I was matched up with some awesome people that came from a learning sector, right? Where it was just about just the ins and outs of educating other people, right? And you learn kind of meta things about learning, which I didn't really think about, right? One of them is something that I didn't really know about called Bloom's taxonomy. And what Bloom's taxonomy is basically just the 6 levels of how someone learns a thing. And it's just something that we've kind of realized that, I mean, we kind of know this, right? Like, for example, it's like you learn how to code and you kind of memorize the things, and there's that phase where you like code something, but you're not really sure why it's there, right? You type something in and something auto-magically happens, and then you just use it and take it for granted, right? So it's one of those things where you are in an environment where people will, you know, where you have all sorts of people and they all kind of learn really different ways, right? And that's a good thing, right? People absolutely just end up like learning through examples. Some people learn in a pure kind of lecture style kind of. Other people want to be in that code, right? And when you're in a situation where you're teaching someone, you have to basically be respectful and be patient of all of those different types of learning styles and be able to convey that code in a way where it gels for someone. And then once that actually does that, then you have to go from just being something where it's like, well, this always happens, right? But now you're being forced to know why exactly this is a thing. You have to learn things about context, right? So if you already even know the code, you have to learn things like context, historical things, right? You get to know a little too much about this, but then you have to be like mindful not to overwhelm a student where this is all possibly new to them, right? And there's been a lot of like learning on my part, just kind of to really understand and appreciate that. What else would I say? Oh yeah, this is the time when we also went, this is the first time we had a virtual thing, and one of the students basically made fun of me by using my screen cap as a virtual background. Yeah, needless to say, that's never happening again. But basically, TLDR, everyone has their own pace, and it's a matter of being respectful of that pace and having a lot of empathy. And I think that's, you know, where maybe other instructors before me may have had a lot of kind of training on how to properly train. Like my hope is that I was still able to bring in enough empathy and work really hard to try to bring my strengths into teaching a bunch of folks, right? It's definitely has its challenges, but there's definitely a very rewarding part to it as well. What else? Yeah, that's it. that's all I have to say, and we're right at 5 minutes. So bam. Whoosh. All right, so that's pretty, oops, not, sorry, not.
Any questions for
That one clap.
Ernie?
So Ernie, thank you, for the lightning round. So how did you get into becoming an instructor? Like, did you do it personally, or is it also just maybe with peers?
So when it comes to like instructing as far as a code school setting,
As far as the code school setting, yeah.
there's an interesting story behind it. So I was working at the Lab Miami, which was one of the first co-working spaces in Miami. That was around 2012, 2013. And that was a co-working space in Wynwood when it was still a little, shall we say, industrial and rough, right? And I was doing Code for Miami, which is a civic hacking tech group. We were meeting up every week, and there wasn't a big tech scene. These two Canadians literally walking through the door, right? Canadians are super friendly, and they're like all smiling, like, hey, we're about to start a code school. I'm Joe, and this is Yuhan. And I was like, hey, nice to meet you. Good luck. And, you know, you shake hands, and you like they leave, and you're like, yeah, I'm never going to see them again, right? Needless to say, they opened up the coding school. It became a thing. It became a huge thing. They actually ended up starting in that co-working space I worked at. So I've been friends with them since the inception, right? And then the timing just kind of worked out, right? I was in between a job, and they were looking for they were looking for an instructor, and they were looking for someone with professional kind of the industry background. And I was like, well, I've liked mentoring, right? Why not? And I just kind of gave a stab at it, right? So different, right? So different from what I from my previous life as just doing kind of very standard work dev stuff. It is definitely not as much of a Venn diagram overlap as, you first think, but I'm glad I did it, right? It's super challenging. No joke, but I'm glad I got sent down this path.
Awesome. Thank you.
when you started, did you create your own structure for the actual curriculum of the class, or did they gave you one and you adapted to it?
No, they give you one. They give you one.
Yeah.
There's absolutely a list of stuff, right? And what you bring to it is kind of the, the empathy and like the delivery and things like that, and basically trying to like also make sure that everyone's kind of up to speed with things.
And do you have to learn some stuff on the go, or do you knew all the material already?
I knew the materials. There was definitely materials where it would have not been my, and I could say this now, right? Like where like Rails was, it's one of those things where I will always be a front end person, and I've said this to my cohort from the beginning, right? Like there's always like these talk about full stacks, and at the end of the day, the idea of a full stack is so varied and wide, is that it is always so rare to be like, I love all these random things totally equally. Like, no, everyone has opinions, right? And for me, it's always, I mean, I've been a web dev, like pure front end web dev since 2000, right? Like that's a hard love to give up, right? So yes, of course I'm going to come in with my biases. That said, the stuff you don't feel as comfortable when, that's a perfect example of basically like being like, well, you better know it like the back of your hand relatively quickly, right? Keep in mind, I have had experience with Rails, so I've totally done Rails in my career. It was just one of those things where I hadn't picked it up in a couple of years, right? So it's like going back to like, it's like seeing an ex again for coffee, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah. So.
Thanks, appreciate it.
All right. So on to the next talk. We have Chris Scott. If you're on our Slack channel, you know him as Cyberstrike, but from his high school days. But Chris Scott's going to be presenting 101 Bones.
Charles.
Yes, sir. Huh?
And last.
Oh
You're
yeah,
last?
we're
Okay, you did change order. Excuse me. So I'm sorry. Next up, instead, we're going to have Rebecca Willett. She'll be talking about lessons from her first job search as a career-changing developer.
Cool. Rebecca, you ready to go?
Yes.
Awesome.
Let's see. Let me pull up my presentation here. Hi, everyone. One second. Where is it? Here it is. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Getting some thumbs up. Awesome. I'm gonna set my own timer. I haven't practiced this, so I'll do my best to keep it at the very least under 10. All right, so just some lessons from my first job search as a career changer. I am on day 3 with my job, so I can officially claim that the job search is over, which is fantastic. I'm very happy about. Not only, well, the job search being over, I'm happy about, and I was lucky to get a really great job at Watsco. So yeah, just wanted to share a few things. I know we have some bootcamp folks on here right now. The job search can really suck, so I learned a few things along the way, and hopefully they can help some other folks have a more tolerable experience. So just some really quick background. I did my bachelor's in something completely unrelated, in international affairs and anthropology. I worked a little in higher ed, social impact. I worked for a startup. I went to do my MBA and then moved to Miami almost 3 years ago to manage Building.co, which is a co-working space in Brickell for tech companies. That's where Ironhack is. There may be some folks on some Ironhack folks on the call who I've crossed paths with before. Hello. I decided last year to do a part-time boot camp at Miami-Dade College via 4Geeks Academy. Basically, it was a shorter boot camp, but at MDC prices. So that's what I was looking for. In the middle of that, there was a restructuring at my company. My position was eliminated, and I was forced to make a decision whether I was going to just go for it, go all in on coding. And I said, let's do it. And so, which was a little scary, but also very exciting because I really enjoyed it. So I spent several months after the boot camp doing a lot of self-directed learning. Also a lot of self-directed doubt, a lot of imposter syndrome, as we've all experienced. And luckily, I have just been able to start my first job as a developer, which is very, very, very exciting. So the job search was all the ups and downs that you can imagine. Most of you have probably gone through it at some point. Frankly, it sucks mostly. But here are a few things that I realized that helped me stay mostly sane. The first one is to use your network. And I know that, you know, all of the co-working, the boot camps, they preach this all the time. But, you know, I want to be clear that this can look like a lot of different things. You know, I was lucky to have, actually my current job came through my network. It actually came because I tweeted about my job search, which I like use Twitter, but not that much. And I truly did not think that would bear fruit, but a bunch of people retweeted it. Someone saw it at the company that I'm now at. And, you know, things went from there. So you truly never know where it's going to come from. Make sure that the people you know about your search. Share it on LinkedIn, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, whatever, like wherever you're active, wherever you have those folks that might, you know people, and know that it's like, it could be a second degree connection type of effect, right? It's not necessarily the people that you know, but like, who do they know? And even those, like, you know, a referral from an acquaintance can actually go a lot farther than, you know, can go light years farther than just submitting your resume to the black hole portal, right? And, you know, I also want to be conscious that a lot of people don't have a network yet. And, you know, I was lucky too, because of my previous job at a co-working space for tech companies. But, you know, there are other ways to engage with people. And I think that the advice that I always give to folks is, you know, when you're networking, which is like kind of a yucky topic, right? Like it makes you think of like going to an event and just like, you have to shake hands with everybody. And like, I'm a fairly introverted person, so like I don't like doing that. And you know, so it's hard for a lot of people, but think of other ways, you know, even like this front-end developers of Miami Slack group, chat, like people chat about stuff that is not even work related. But you know, chime in, show your personality, ask questions, technical or otherwise. And, you know, just sort of share your voice, your own, who you are, because that's really who people hire. Ask for feedback. I asked at one point for feedback on Twitter for my portfolio, and I got so much great feedback. And it also meant that people were looking at my portfolio, you know? So what I hope that you take away is that when we talk about network, it's not just like going to a networking meetup or, you know, trying to get the business card of as many people as possible. Like, it's not really about that. Ask for help, spread the word. Second one is just to keep learning. So my boot camp was, you know, it was less extensive curriculum wise than like Ironhack or WinCode. I knew that going into it. It's also a lot cheaper, so that's why I chose it, knowing that I would have to continue learning. And I did that through Udemy courses, lots of online materials, just building projects. And I knew, you know, that I had a good base of knowledge, but that I had a lot left to learn. And we all have a lot left to learn, right? You will forever have a lot left to learn. That's just how this whole thing works. But basically, one of the main things that kept me going during this time is that I felt that I was able to make myself a better candidate with time by learning more things and building more projects. In terms of projects, I chose projects that solved a personal problem for me, as it doesn't even have to be a huge thing, but like it has a purpose. And I got really good feedback on that. People like to see that you're using your skills to solve problems, because that's, you know, sort of the idea, right? So that I would recommend that as well. Make projects that solve a problem, however small, in your life or someone else's. This is probably the most important one. Take breaks. Rest is really necessary. And trust me, I went all over the spectrum on this, like times that I coded for 12 hours a day and like my back and my knees were just like, why are we doing this? And then times that I couldn't focus and I didn't get much done for several days in a row. And neither of those is sustainable, right? So this is a very hard-earned lesson, but this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. So take your breaks, set your working times, work during your working times, rest during your resting times, make sure you're doing the things that make you happy still, whatever that looks like for you. And just make sure that you're taking care of yourself, because you can't help yourself or anyone else if you're not taking care of yourself. In terms of, we were chatting about this today on the Slack, practice live coding assessments, because I had legitimate panic attacks after the first 3 that I did. It was not fun. They continue to not be fun, but I've been able to sort of take the edge off by practicing out loud with someone. So go on Code Wars or whatever you use and actually have someone sitting next to you. They don't even have to know about coding. Actually, even better if they don't, because you have to explain better. And just walk through the steps that you're going through. And the more you do that, it becomes slightly less bad, I promise. And finally, just be authentic. In the beginning, I felt a little weird about sharing that, I come from a non-traditional background. Part of my journey is that I got laid off, which, has had nothing to do with me personally, but, it's always sort of a weird thing to talk about, right? There's still sort of a stigma attached to that. And, but at a certain point, I kind of said, fuck it. And I just started being very open and honest about my entire journey. And I got amazing. It was received amazingly. It really resonated with people. So that was encouraging to me. And I felt that, it was nice to feel that, me being authentic was resonating with people. So it's very cheesy to say, be yourself. But, maybe be authentic, be open, be honest, and people feel that and they appreciate it, because that's the kind of person we like to work with, right? That's about it. You can do it. It's closer than you think, probably. It's hard because you just never know what is going to come, but it will. Where I was a month ago, and that reminds me that I am making progress. And yeah, there's my information. I'm just under 10 minutes, so I'm going to stop now. The end. Thank
All right.
Congratulations on your new job.
Thank you.
All right, any questions for Rebecca?
I see the chat was blowing up. I was not reading, but let me know if there are questions.
Are you the one that mentioned the traffic?
Yes.
Well, you made it on time.
I made it on time, so that's
you
good.
did.
All
Do
right,
you
so-
consider necessary to have a portfolio, or just a GitHub is enough?
I personally really promote having a portfolio, because sometimes you can't actually get in front of people to talk to them yet, and you don't have their attention span for more than a sentence or two in an email. And so if you can just drop a link to your portfolio, they can actually see what you do. And I think that is an opener for a conversation that is maybe harder to get if you're just writing paragraphs about yourself. So I highly, highly recommend it.
Thanks.
Oh, Rebecca, I have a question.
Yeah.
How rigorous was your interview process? Like how well prepared were you to answer those questions? When did you feel like you were ready?
I still don't really feel like I'm ready, but
Right.
In terms of, so for me, I guess there's not really a solid answer, when are you ready, when are you not ready? I think that, in the beginning, I will say that it got easier with time. The first the very first time technical assessment that I had, which was not even live, it was not on the phone or on video with anyone, but it was timed. I blew it so bad. Like it was a half hour and there were 3 questions and I barely even got to understand the questions in half an hour. So that was like, that was one of my first like technical assessment experiences. And I bombed it and I had like complete meltdown afterwards because I was like, I suck. I feel dumb, like the whole thing. Right. But I also recognized that, you know, I was going to have to, you know, one, that would probably get better with time and also with practice, which it did. So I would say you gotta throw yourself in the water and start, you know, and you're going to have interviews that go absolutely terrible. Like it's going to happen. And, you know, also keep in mind, like we were talking about this on the chat today, like, you know, there are times that you don't have a great interviewer or like, you know, live coding assessments or whiteboarding interviews are really hard for everyone, including senior devs. So that's like not specific to you, you know, but yeah, you just gotta jump in and start doing it. There's never really going to be a moment where you're like, yes, I'm great and perfect at all of this, you know?
Yeah, for sure. All right.
Rebecca, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What program did you use to do your portfolio?
My portfolio is done in React.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca. What stack are you working in? I'm sorry.
Hilariously enough, the stack that I'm currently working in, I had 0 experience with. I'm working mostly with SQL and Rails, which I did not study. I did before my second interview, I spent an entire weekend studying SQL so I could show up to that interview more or less knowing the basics. And then the week before I started my job, I gave myself a crash course in Ruby. So yeah, which is hilarious because I basically studied like a JavaScript stack. So not that at all.
Did you do that independently, you said?
Yeah, so the bootcamp that I did taught us basically a kind of an intro in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, and a little bit of PHP, but kind of not really. Mm-hmm. And then I continued practicing on my own a lot with React, and also I did a Udemy course on Node, Express, and MongoDB, sort of like starting to complete that JavaScript stack on my own.
Okay. Awesome.
I have a question. So while you were in school, when did it click for you where everything kind of came together and you knew that you were understanding and taking in that information so that you can regurgitate it out into the real world in tech?
I mean, I lacked confidence for a long time, and honestly, even coming out of the boot camp, I knew that like I had a lot to learn. But I think, you know, even early on in the boot camp, even though I felt that I didn't know very much at all, I could tell that I really enjoyed the creativity that it required, which was like something that I didn't really expect. And I also really enjoyed like just being able to like tangibly build something. And even though I was doing like very basic, ugly stuff, like I could feel that that was a thing. And something that I was really missing in my job at the time was, you know, there were really a lot of really great things about my job, but there were some days that I would leave and it would be like, what did I do today? You know, like I sent emails and I like talked to people but I was really craving that like tangible building. And I could sense that like I was going to get that. And just like, I liked the fact that code does what you tell it to. And, you know, it's most of the time not doing the right thing, but it's because you haven't told it the right thing yet. Right. And all of that just like really clicked with my brain, even before I was like knew very much.
Okay. Awesome. Congratulations on the job.
Oh, yeah.
One last question is going to be from Rachel, because I saw her, she was trying to squeeze one in edgewise a couple of times. So go ahead, Rach.
Yeah. Well, first, congratulations on your job. I have seen a lot of people, including myself, getting jobs in the past, like, you know, 3 to 4 weeks, and suddenly having to do everything remotely. I'm guessing yours is remote as well. Yeah. So how has that kind of lived up to like your expectation for starting this job? And yeah, like in a time where you probably thought you were going in to a place and now suddenly it's all remote and you don't have someone over your shoulder.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, I was also applying to remote jobs. So I was had that sort of expectation in my head. So I wasn't mad about that. And also I've been studying on my own full time for the last several months. So I kind of have that experience of like not having someone over my shoulder, but just having to like, you know, have that sort of develop a discipline during the day, which, you know, obviously sometimes is better. Some days is better than others. Right. So I kind of like was already in that mode to some degree. And I mean, right now I honestly just feel lucky that I can be working from home with everything that's going on. If anyone else has other questions, feel free to hit me up on Slack, and I'm happy to answer them.
I have to like unmute myself. Yeah.
Monday.
All right. So next up, let me see. Do we have any other order changes, or am I cool to announce William?
Nope. Next up is
All right.
Ron. Yep.
William
There you
Kennedy.
go.
All right. He's going to be giving us a quick intro to Next.js and why we should be looking at it.
All right, hey guys, can everyone see my screen? Just want to make sure. Yeah, so I know like a lot of us come from different boot camps, whether it be Iron Hack. I personally came from WinCode, and we all learned React, I'm sure, as our front end framework. So I just want to give you a brief introduction into Next.js. Oh, sorry about that. So a little bit about me. I graduated from WinCode in December 2019. Luckily, I was hired by Dasly Inc. So what Dasly Inc. is a data consultancy that helps their clients understand and utilize their data better by identifying gaps between people, processes, and technology to drive businesses forward. So I decided to join Dasly because coming out of the boot camp, I didn't feel like that well off in my backend skills. And I felt working with a company that primarily focuses with like data analytics would definitely like help speed up my skills in the back end. And currently my stack that I work with at work is Next.js, Apollo, GraphQL. Next.js, look, on my spare time, my hobbies, like on my side projects, like I like to build front end in the front end. So like I use Next.js a lot, and I think it would definitely help you guys just talking about it. So pretty much the main features I wanted to go over were hot code reloading, pretty cool, automatic routing, you know, you create dynamic pages, the server-side rendering, and the styling of the components. So hot code reloading, this is not really like a framework feature, but it, you know, kind of makes your life easier. You know, every time you save your text editor, it'll obviously automatically like update the browser for you. So I have a bunch of these like live code snippets, so you kind of see exactly what I'm kind of talking about. Here I'm creating a simple paragraph tag, you know, just, and then I'm gonna hit the save, and then automatically you'll see my browser update, and there you go. That's that. So you know, starting off, I always had trouble. I'm like, why isn't my code working? And a lot of the times, I forgot to save my text editor. So this kind of helped me out a little bit. I think server-side rendering is probably the biggest benefit, I would say, of Next.js. So typically the browser sends a request to the server for an HTML document, and then that loads, and then afterwards the JavaScript file will then load after the document's loaded. With server-side rendering, the HTML document will download with all the content and the JavaScript already there. So possibly the initial load may be a little slower, but after that, you know, your pages start rendering a lot faster. And also helps with SEO. So it's really simple to add metadata to your documents, to your components, and then you can do some SEO rankings and stuff. So the automatic routing, typically Next.js
projects have a pages directory. So anytime you add a file to the pages directory, whether it's an about.js or a contact.js, it automatically creates that route for you. So here I have an example. I'm going to make an about.js file in the pages directory. Also, another cool thing is, even though this is a React framework, I don't have to import React into all my files. It automatically understands that a stateless functional component can be rendered. And then now I have my about file, and once I go to /about, that page is automatically rendered for me. I didn't have to add React Router DOM. I didn't have to create a specific route for it, anything like that. Also, what's pretty cool is you can have a link component. Next.js also provides a link component that allows you to navigate through your routes a lot easier. So typically this can be done with an anchor tag, but here, like, the href in the anchor tag goes in the link component rather than the anchor tag itself. And then that'll do the client side routing for you. It's really quick. I have a brief little preview there. And then once you click home, it'll take you back home. Moving right along. So another cool feature is that you don't always have to explicitly define your pages. You can dynamically create pages, right? So if, say you have a blog, for example, and then you have a bunch of different articles and you click on a specific article, that article will automatically be rendered in its own route if you set up your link component the correct way. So I have an example of this where I make a new functional component that takes in the props, and then I'm pretty much going to set up the href to be the props.title that I give this component. And essentially what that'll do is, oh, sorry about my Slack message there. Essentially what that'll do is that instead of saying slash the title, slash like pages slash whatever the title of the page is, I can just go ahead and directly interpolate the title, and then it'll be localhost / title, right? So here you'll see me just, sorry for my typing. I'm a little messy with that sometimes. But essentially what it'll do is it'll create the route. So here I'll just create a list item, so I can add a couple different examples for you. I'll give it a prop of title, and the first one will be next page, new page, and then the other one will be like another page. And essentially, so when that renders, I'll be able to click on the link, and then it'll automatically create a route for me. So as you'll see in just a second. So I didn't actually have a component to render, which is why I'm getting the error page. But if you see in the URL, the routes are dynamically created, right? And another cool feature is the error handling, right? So Next.js also provides an error page for you, right? So if you didn't create that component, or if you have nothing to render, it'll have that 404 page automatically set up for you. So another cool feature is the custom wrapper component, right? A lot of times you want your like navigation to live on every page. So you can set up a custom wrapper where each component is wrapped within a container, which you can directly import from Next.js. All the documentation on Next.js is, it's really straightforward. They have great documentation. You can go ahead and read up on it if I'm moving too quickly for you. But the benefits of this is that you can persist layout changes. You can keep state while navigating through pages. I work with GraphQL at work, so whenever I make my GraphQL queries, I can inject my queries right here in this custom wrapper and then pass them down as props really easily to each page, just in case I need those queries, just in case I need that data anywhere. And then each component is automatically comes from the props of the custom wrapper. So here, like I set up a quick nav. I want it to live on every page. Sorry if it's taking a little while. I just wanted to, try to show you my process here. So I set up the links from the home and about, quick nav, don't mind the styling. And it was really simple to set up. And then it allows you to pass down props super easily. Let me get a quick second to the video to catch up here. I'm going to import the nav. You can import different components just like in React. If you want to handle your state using hooks or using hooks, you can just import React and the useState hook from React, just like any other normal React file, and you can do it that way. The cool thing about Next.js, it's a React framework at the end of the day, so all the React features are automatically included in Next.js, right? So here, then the nav was imported, and as you can see, it lives on both pages automatically. And last but not least, the styling of the components. So Next.js provides pretty cool style JSX tag element. So essentially, this element just takes an object and then a template literal, and then you can literally write your CSS right directly in there, right? So you can call the background color of like blue, which you'll see here. If you want to select an H1 tag, you can go ahead and do that. You can style different classes that live in this component right here. And this is only specific to this particular component, right? These styles won't style any other pages or any other components that you have in your project, which is cool, right? So that doesn't it doesn't allow you to have like huge 16,000 line codes of CSS file, right? Of CSS. So that I found that pretty neat trick. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have any other questions, please let me know. I included the documentation. There's a lot more features in here, but I really wanted to keep this brief. I just wanted to give you like a quick introduction to the cool features that Next.js brings in. You can hit me up on Slack, LinkedIn, my portfolio is there. So if you want to see some other projects I've done in Next.js, it's all there. But yeah.
William, question.
Yep, go ahead.
I'm a little confused. So Next.js, is it a framework of its own, or is it a React dependency?
It's a React dependency, yeah. So it's a framework of React, yeah.
Thanks.
Sorry if that wasn't clear. Yeah.
Sorry, you did great. Thank you.
Yeah, so I know a lot of us, like I did in Winco, I learned React. I'm talking to a few of you beforehand. You guys learned React at Ironhack too. So I just want to show you like a quick alternative, which I thought was really beneficial from when I learned it. So yeah.
I have a question. Where did you hear about Next.js? Because I think I heard about it in the Syntax FM podcast.
Yeah. So Wes Boss
Nice.
definitely put me onto this for sure. And then once I saw like how quickly everything was loading, I was like, man, these pages are. And then I started. We create our own APIs using GraphQL at work. I was like, man, this really integrates seamlessly. So started developing in Next.js for sure.
Nice, man. Do you have any like pre-made any projects that you've done already with that, maybe in your portfolio or something that I could like check out? Or
Yeah. There's one called GeoPins. I'll link my portfolio in the chat. .dev. You have to log in with Google, but other than that, it allows you to create pins on a map, and it's all done in Next.js and everything.
Cool. Thanks. All right. So we are going to still keep on moving on. Is George or Jorge here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sweet.
All right. Great. Let me share my screen. So sorry for the presentation. Like I didn't check the Slack till the last minute, and I wasn't sure if I was going to present. So yeah, I'm gonna briefly talk about how to scale or deploy and scale a multi-tier application using Docker. So I put together, well, first of all, about me, like I'm a software engineer working at Medallia, which is a company that does customer experience. Nowadays, I work mostly with GraphQL, React, Node.js, Docker, but I've done a few different things in the past, including Rails, .NET, a little bit of Java. So it's been a fun ride so far. So I put together a demo app not too long ago. So this demo app is basically a very simple React web application. It has Node.js using Express API server, and I have a Postgres database. So it's, as you can see, it's very simple. Basically, we have like a couple of entities like actors, movies. Some of the technologies that I've used for this application were React Admin, which is an open source project that allows you to set up an admin page fairly quickly. It has different providers, so it talks to different types of APIs like a REST API, a GraphQL API, Prisma. Another thing I use is NX, which is it's a tool for monorepos. If you haven't heard about what a monorepo is basically a way for you to package different or related applications into the same project. So I'm going to show a little bit shortly how the project looks like. But basically, in the same project, I have the front-end code, the back-end code, and any other project that I may need. For instance, if I need to set up another type of server or whatever, I can put it in the monorepo, and I can handle all those different packages or projects within the same project. Like, especially makes things easier if you have, say, different NPM packages that, say you have a package that has common utilities or database connections, and you need to use that package across different servers or services. You can easily reference that without having to commit to one repo, then pull like do a npm install on another repo and go through that. Then I use TypeORM, which is the abstraction layer for the database, and well, Postgres. In terms of the infrastructure, how to set this up on a server, my goal was to basically put this demo app together and then deploy it on a server with that can be deployed very easy, that can be portable, so you can easily use any VM or provider that you want, and then deploy the application with a few steps. So for that, I use Docker, Docker Compose. That is a tool that Docker uses. I'm going to explain a little bit what Docker is for if anybody is not familiar with. Traefik, which is the gateway that I'm going to mention as well a little bit more. And well, Portainer, which is basically a manager for Docker. It's a UI that allows you to manage your containers, your Docker containers. So what is Docker? It's if we can start saying or having an analogy against virtual machines, right? Probably like you heard or you know what a virtual machine is, right? We have like a server, a physical server that has an operating system, and on top of that you have like a hypervisor, say VMware, VirtualBox, a few others, right? This hypervisor allows you to basically spin up virtual servers within your server, right? So you can have much more density in terms of like use your servers in a more efficient way. So you can have many smaller VMs in your server doing different things, like a database VM, a Java VM, whatever, right? And then on top of that, each of those VMs has its own operating system, and then all the applications that like the VM may need, right? As you can imagine, having multiple operating systems within the same server on top of the hypervisor can be expensive, depending on what the usage is. So there is this technology in Linux called containers that Docker popularized a few years ago. The main idea of these containers is that allows you to have isolation across different applications, if you will, like, or containers, how they're called. the difference between the main difference between containers and VMs is that containers basically they share the same underlying operating system. So in Linux, maybe you heard about the kernel, the Linux kernel. Like all the containers that run in your Docker instance will have the same, will share the same kernel. So this makes these applications very very lean. And another difference is that, or approach, usually like the recommended approach when you're working with Docker is that each of the containers that you create should be should handle one application, like should be one usage, like should handle one usage, right? Like in a VM, like usually you can install like a database and a bunch of like the front application, the backend, Nginx, Apache, all that stuff in one single VM. In containers, you usually want to separate each of the applications or services in your application in different containers, so you can scale them individually and makes the manage of like allows you to manage those in an easier way. So how does the Docker architecture work briefly? We have a client, like usually a CLI, like a command line tool that you interact with. You have the Docker host, like if you install Docker in your computer, the host will be basically a VM running inside your machine. So if you run Docker in your command line, you will be talking to that VM that it's running the Docker engine. And then there is something called the Docker registry that is basically a place like hub.docker.com, which is an open source server or a free service that allows you to host public images. So you can basically pull images from this service for any type of, for many applications that you want. If you want Postgres, you can pull an image of Postgres and the version you need from the Docker registry. You want Node, you can do that as well. You can pull it directly. And you can create your own images, and you can publish them to the Docker Hub. Think of it like npm, right? The npm registry. The other aspect, or the other service that or tool that I'm going to be using is Traefik, which is a gateway that basically allows you to have a single point of contact for your application or for your service. So think of it like Traefik sitting in front of your server, the one that is going to be receiving all the requests from all the HTTP requests from the browsers. It can also handle other kind of traffic, but we're going to focus only on HTTP at this point. Say api.domain.com gets it's received by Traefik, and then based on certain rules, and in this case the domain, we can route that request to say an API server, right? In this case, it can be like a Docker container running the API server. With Traefik, we can basically route those requests to that one. Like the domain.com/web, if we want like to serve the front end code, like the web application itself, we can route that to a different container running Nginx or Apache, and then serve that through Traefik. One of the neat features that Traefik has is that it handles the SSL certificates automatically for you using Let's Encrypt, which is basically a service that allows you to have free SSL certificates in an automated way. Like a few years ago, when you needed to have HTTPS, you have to pay $10 a year and then basically buy a certificate, download it, install it on your server, and do that every year. With Let's Encrypt, you can do that in an automated way, and Traefik makes things much easier. So I'm gonna show you real quick, like what the project looks like. In this case, we have the API server, which, as I mentioned, is basically an Express application. We have the app here, which is the React application. From this same monorepo, I added a few different things, basically to handle all the Docker stuff. So when you are, say, developing locally, one of the things you want to do is you want to install the database, right? Like one approach is to basically download the actual database and install it and go through that pane. But another approach is to basically use Docker to run the database that you need. In this case, I'm going to use Postgres. So I'm going to run a command that basically Docker compose. I'm going to say Docker compose dev app. What this is going to do is it's going to pull from the Docker registry a database, a database image, and it's going to run Postgres, right? I didn't have to install anything. Like basically Docker pulled the image, it ran it, and it exposing this on a port that I selected, right? So the next thing that I'm going to do, well, basically I already started here the front end, and I started the back end here, right? This is only for local development, so I can go to my local host port 4200 and then run the application, right? And everything works. Now, say that you finished working on your application. What we're going to do now is we are going to go to a server. This is a VPS running on a provider. Like you can use like DigitalOcean, Vultr, OVH, whatever you feel like. First of all, like the beauty of, let me shut this down for a second. The beauty of running all this thing with Docker is that basically like you don't have to install much on the server that you're going to run all these things, right? The bare minimum that you need is basically Docker and Docker Compose, right? Like many providers even gives you images with Docker already installed, so you can just spin up a new server with Docker and you are ready to go. In this case, for convenience, I basically cloned the repo. So this is the repo that I was working on, and what I'm going to do now is, well, as you can see here, I'm interacting with the Docker engine. I'm saying what are the containers that are running in this computer, in this server. This is an unrelated container, and now I'm gonna say Docker compose. I'm gonna say which Docker compose file I'm gonna start, and I'm gonna say app, right? We're gonna spin up this whole service. Before hitting that, let me briefly show you what that Docker compose file looks like. So this is the Docker compose, and this is where we define what the services of our whole application user needs, right? In this case, we have traffic here, which is the gateway that I was mentioning. We have the API server. We have the app, which is the front end code. We have adminer, which is basically a UI for the database, and we have Postgres, right? Each of these, like in this case for the API server, I'm using Node 12 Docker image, and I'm forget about labels for now. It's just gonna things make a little bit more confusing. But basically, we're saying this image depends on Postgres, which is the service that runs the Postgres database. Because basically my API server will need to talk to the database. In this case, we have the app. This app uses an image, which is an Nginx image, which is a web server similar to Apache, but faster. And then, well, we have these other things. So what I'm saying, what I'm doing with Docker Compose is basically saying I want to start all these services on this server, right? So I'm gonna say Docker Compose app. If the images don't exist on the server, Docker is gonna basically pull those images directly from Docker registry, and once it has them, it's gonna run them, right? In this case, it's gonna start running each of the services. You will see that it has different colors for the different services that are running. Traffic started already, Postgres started, API started as well. So now we can go to the browser. Take this out of the way. And then this is a server, this is a domain that I'm using that points to that server. As you can see, Traffic basically handles the SSL certificate. Like if you see here, it's Let's Encrypt. Traffic and Let's Encrypt gives you like, or the validity of the SSL certificates are 3 months, and Traffic will basically renew the certificates automatically for you, so you don't have to worry about anything about that. As you can see here, we're hitting an endpoint, which is another subdomain, like in this case, actors, for instance, and this endpoint, because like I want that all the services that are exposed on my server to be secure. This also has its own SSL certificate that Traffic is it's handling. Also, I'm exposing the dashboard that Traffic gives you. In this case, Traffic basically tells me, okay, these are all the rules that you have in your Docker, in your architecture and your infrastructure. We have like the API, we have the main host, and these are the services that each of these routes point to, right? So each of these services, like app, web app, API secure, adminer, those are each of the services that I define in Docker. And then the other thing that I have is this Postgres UI tool that allows me to basically see the database and interact with the database. Yeah, you can get this demo app in my GitHub repo. In my GitHub account, I try to add as much as documentation as I could. So hopefully it's a good starting point for other projects that wants to do something similar. Any questions?
Awesome.
Done.
Can you paste that link to the Zoom chat, please?
Sure.
That's awesome.
Are we gonna limit questions here just because we went a little over time with that talk? So let's try and get
Sorry about
two,
that.
maybe three. No, you're good. You're good.
And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach him out to him at Yorch over the FEDM Slack.
Yeah, certainly. Happy to help.
So any questions before we move on to the next talk? Feel free, pipe up.
Okay, I think we're up for the next one.
All right. So next up, Andres, are you on still? You with us?
Yeah.
All right, Andres. All right, Andres is going to be talking about the mean stack and COVID-19. This will be interesting. Let's go.
Oh yeah.
10 minutes on the clock, buddy.
Yeah, share my screen over here. Okay. So hi everyone. I'm Andres Urdaneta. I'm currently working as a full stack web developer for Biscayne Devs, which is my own company, which is like kind of cheating because I didn't find a job. So I'm gonna be talking about Angular and the tutorial help. First, what's Angular? It's an app design framework for single-page web and mobile applications created and managed by Google. And it uses JavaScript and TypeScript, which is a superset of JavaScript. Some of you are maybe already familiar with TypeScript or maybe not, but to be honest, it's kind of the same thing. But I'm gonna be covering about some of the perks of using TypeScript. So Angular and TypeScript. One of the perks of TypeScript is that, as already mentioned, is not that different from EX6 syntax, but gives you some tools to write more clean code and actually avoid some typos. And this is really good if you're working on large or complex projects, because we are all as a developer know that it's kind of difficult sometimes to get stuck for hours just because of a typo. So the TypeScript is really good to try to avoid that. So one of the main question is Angular versus, oh, this is not the right slide. First, we gotta understand Angular JS or Angular. I got confused when I got into Angular because what is the difference? Well, the difference is that Angular JS is basically the version 1, and it was released by Google in 2010. And 6 years after that, they released Angular as we know it today, because Angular JS wasn't that popular, because it was kind of difficult to get into it. So they made some big changes, and we got Angular as we know it today. So if you're gonna jump into learning Angular, just don't get confused by this. Angular JS is just the version 1, and I'll suggest you to go to Angular 2 or above, which is kind of the same thing. Okay, Angular versus React. This is one of the questions that I'm not gonna be able to solve because it's super complex and it depends on every developer, because there are some things that you may like or you may not like. Like there's a difference in the language or the syntax. React uses EXIS and JSX, and Angular uses EXIS or JavaScript and TypeScript. There's also a difference between the structure. React doesn't have like a proper structure unless you use libraries like Next.js, and Angular has a fixed structure to work with, which is kind of a good thing for me. There's a learning curve. Of course, I'm a React guy, first of all, so definitely learning React is so much more easy than Angular at the beginning. So there are trade-offs about that. Cool then. So I'm gonna be talking now about the tutorial hub, and I believe that as a developers we all fall into this and we go over a tutorial, we feel good about it, we're learning a lot, we put a lot of hours on that Udemy course, and as soon as we face a real real world project, we just get stuck and we feel overwhelmed. We just notice that we know nothing, or because it's kind of overwhelming, all the stuff that you gotta put into practice just after a tutorial. So with all this coronavirus stuff, I just thought, okay, let's get out of the tutorial hell for once and learn Angular. I avoid at all or like online courses on all that stuff, and I just created there's an app that keeps tracks of all the coronavirus cases all over the world. It's kind of an MVP right now. So this is it, coronachart.live. If you guys wanna check it out, cool. And I found myself going over a lot of Stack Overflow. So if you ever want to prove you as a developer, go and create something. If you want to really learn and grasp some concepts, go and create something. Job if you don't have any idea, that's okay. You can jump into a open source project, and you're gonna be facing and struggling a lot with real world problems in projects. But I guarantee you that you're gonna learn so much more from this experience, from struggling, that actually going over every tutorial course that you find on Udemy or whichever other platform. So thanks, guys. Just keep creating. That's why we are into this, because we want to create things, great things. So feel free to connect with me, and thank you.
I agree 100%, bro. Nice talk.
Andres, question for you: do you have a GitHub repo of that Corona Live?
Yes, actually, yes. Just let me.
Feel free to drop that in the chat. And
Yeah,
if you have if you're in
that's-
Slack, please put it there too.
Yeah,
Looks
sure.
great.
This is my first time on Zoom, so I'm trying to figure out how to come back to the.
Is this your first time on Zoom?
Yeah, I usually use Meetups from Google.
Same.
Sweet.
We're all learning Zoom here.
So while we're prepping for the next one, like I'll show you guys the screen that Andres didn't share, which is this, and it looks pretty sweet.
That's I'm working on some more stuff, but I wanted to get something out. So yeah, because if not, you're gonna be just working on it, and it's never ready.
Looks great, man. Nice job.
What's the biggest challenge you've run into building your COVID chart so far?
Almost everything.
Pick one.
Like waiting for people to answer me questions on Stack Overflow, and I was just going crazy because I wanted to know what was happening with my code, and nobody was answering me. So I was doing a lot of research, going kind of crazy, but patience to wait for people to answer your questions. Maybe just keep trying, doing some more research. The answer is gonna come.
You know, I've never signed up for Stack Overflow, despite how much I use it. I don't think I could ever have that patience. That's interesting. Yeah, man.
Yeah, it's definitely challenging, but you're gonna end up feeling so much more stronger as a developer because you're gonna be solving real problems in a project.
You're not wrong.
Cool, nice job. All right, so last but certainly not least, we have, rounding this up, is our none other than our co-host for this evening, Chris Scott. Chris, are you ready to go?
Yeah. No.
That is not the word. That is not the stroke of confidence I was looking for. Like, whatever.
Now or never.
We'll see. Let's find out.
Well, listen, if you can't do 10, then we'll do 5 and we'll call it a day.
Oh no, I can definitely do 10.
Okay. Okay, 10 minutes. 10 minutes on the clock.
That's great. All right. Can you guys see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. So, hi, I'm Cyberstrike, also known as Chris Scott. And I'm a full stack developer who loves Vue. You can usually find me on Slack. You can always ask me questions, and I'm more than happy to help out. So my presentation, 101 Bones. It's a quick primer on skeleton loaders. Should probably get you about 90% to understanding everything you want to do about it and give your own presentation. So the problem, blank, like absolutely blank websites. Like if you have an SPA, you're not doing SSR, you try to load up the app, you've got about a second, maybe 2 of a completely blank screen. If not, you may have this. It's just loading. It's like, what the hell is this? It's already, it feels like it's taking long. It's literally a clock. You're watching a clock. And the act of watching this clock actually feels longer than it actually is. Solution comes to us all the way from 2013. Luke Grabowski, while working on Polar B, which is came out of that like hot or not thing back in 2013, and it was acquired by Google later. It was pretty much an acqui-hire. But yeah, he came out with this whole like paradigm of having a single skeleton of an outline of what the screen is going to look like. No data, just an outline that progressively loads in as you go. And this was pretty crazy because it allowed you to see what was coming. You got a skeleton, an outline, almost a ghost of the content that's coming in. Speaking of content, it's also known as a content loader. And if you take notice of this, 2013, this is when LTE just became a huge popular thing. Right, so this is first of 4G. And before that, websites were really, really slow. So this was actually more than a second people are waiting. The science behind it. So there's a lot of like things about perceived performance. Perceived performance is what it feels like for a person versus the actual numbers for an application to act. And if your perceived performance is off by about just over a second, people immediately feel like it's slowed down because there's this disconnect between the click and the action. There's some science around this. Did this go to new page or did it open a tab? Anyway, so yeah, this guy went around, he did an actual user testing session. A lot of what I'm talking about is cribbed from here. It's really cool. Give it a huge read. I'll get this, all my links and stuff and resources that I use to you guys in a bit. But yeah, he did the science. It's pretty cool. Okay, yeah. So yeah, the perceived performance is reduced by about 700 milliseconds. So even if it takes about 1 second, it'll feel like about 700. If it takes 2 seconds, it'll feel like a second too, which is a huge, huge change when it comes to perceived performance. So mass adoption of this didn't really come until like 2017, 2018. Which was really weird considering it started in 2013. But there was a time where we started using user testing and everyone just sort of like tested the heck out of speed. Like if you didn't feel fast, you were slow and you were dead. So Facebook implemented these nice little loaders. LinkedIn got their loaders. Google, which since they acqui-hired Polar B back in 2014, has been using skeleton loaders since 2014. And I think we could probably try YouTube. Let's see if we can see that. There it is. Skeleton loader pops in. You have that, even though that takes about 2 to 3 seconds, it feels a little faster. It's pretty cool. Now, let's see, implementation. So the implementation of this is a little tricky. You have to seamlessly imitate this let's get back to presentation. You have to imitate the outline of a skeleton, right? The outline of the view that's coming in. You may think that CSS might be the best way to go. There's a nice article on CSS tricks. where they go through some examples and they pull out some code, which is really cool. They use CSS to build out all the shapes. Look at those CSS variables, how edgy. Add some animations, and this is what you get. It's really cool, but it's absolutely impractical. Like, I've tried to do this for every single component. It is a nightmare, an absolute nightmare to go and code these CSS shapes and code this all out. It takes forever. But yeah, it's a great in theory. SVGs, on the other hand, if you don't know what an SVG is, an SVG is essentially programmatic drawing. We can go in, draw out using a path exactly what you want and animate it with CSS. Again, doing this by hand, Adobe Flash, doing this by hand would be pretty tedious. There's lots of different tools out there to allow you to draw SVGs like you would in Photoshop, Sketch. I started Inkscape in, I don't even remember, 2011, 2010, and it's still around. And it codes with S. You can override it with CSS. You can pop this into your React component and render it out. But still, to sit down and code that every single time also is very annoying. So implementation. This is like the holy grail. This is not only a tool, it's a live coding tool. It will go in, you can go in, draw out your shapes for your component, and it will give you the exact React code you need. It also works for Vue or straight SVGs. It writes all that out for you. In the future, you'll be able to generate a GIF. Wow, this is actually going a lot faster than I expected. And take your slightly slow and ambiguously loading screen to a little more snappier. While I say loading screen, this like skeleton loaders are not a replacement for, say, an action button where you click it and you get a nice little loader in there when something is happening, or when you're loading new content in. This is for initial page loads only. It makes it feel snappier on initial load. It's not for new content that's coming in. So don't worry about, like, it would get slightly annoying for me too if the entire thing replaced with a new content loader every single time. Users are also surprised by that. So I don't recommend it for completely redoing your entire loading paradigm, but only for the initial load of the screen. Let's see if there's anything else. Let me post this link in the chat so you guys can take a look at it. Play around with it if you like, but implementation is really straightforward. It's a really light library. There are some weeds, as in it doesn't completely support responsiveness at the moment. So if you want to have a component that changes according to screen size, it's not gonna load the right one at the moment. But hopefully I'll fix that this weekend. The power of open source. All right, and I think that is it.
That is pretty effing
Nice.
cool, man. So here's a question for you, Chris. How often do you implement this? Because I can see how like high traffic websites could really really need to use this, right? Where every millisecond counts. But where's that? Like how many times have you implemented it on like sites that you've worked on where
I'm going to be implementing it on a site on Car Buckets at the moment, shortly, but beforehand, not really anywhere else. I had been waiting exactly for this type of tool before I bothered, because otherwise it's not cost effective to do this for every single component that you're doing by hand from scratch. But this tool just makes it so much super easier. This would drop implementation time from an hour to like 10 minutes per component you're working on.
Awesome.
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So you implement the skeleton loader for when a component mounts. Am I understanding that correctly?
Exactly. Just on that initial load. So you'll have some sort of wrapper component, possibly that handles the loading or checks for data. And then when the data is ready, then it loads in, it renders and mounts that component. So this is perfect for empty states. So that initial mount would be an empty state.
Cool, thanks.
An empty state again is a whole other talk.
Do you have any ideas on how we could possibly implement like a design for it using for like listed content where you don't really know the length of the collection beforehand? Or do you go out of your way to like make an endpoint so that you can get the count earlier? That's a little bit overkill, but I mean, do you have any ideas on how you tackle that problem? Like I saw the YouTube one and they just cover like the whole screen, but like, I mean, is that it? Like, I don't know.
Essentially there is magic you can do. Like I've been thinking about that, and that you can try and figure out the height of the container you're in, and then okay, I can then multiply by the amounts the average size that I'm expecting this thing to be, and then just expand accordingly so it just fills the container. That way it looks like there's stuff that's gonna be loaded in. But from what I see, they just grab an arbitrary number.
Yeah.
Awesome, you guys. Cool. And then if you have any questions for Chris, just send it over to the Slack. All right, guys, we are officially done. Who here is actually not already on the FEDM Slack? Because I know at least one person. All right, so you two, at least.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to join now.
Y'all definitely need to join now, right? Okay, so I am pasting a link. Yep, there it is. Chris beat me to the punch. Go, if you haven't joined, go ahead and click on that link. Send yourself an invitation to the Slack. Most of us are already on there, and we are just continuing this conversation. I want to thank everyone for the talks tonight. Give everyone a big hand again.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. I enjoyed the live talks. It was
Awesome.
great.
Awesome. Okay.
Thank you, and sorry I was late, and hopefully we do this more often because this is really good.
Yay!
Yeah. Shout outs to the turnout too. All of us old guard over here just really impressed. This is like our biggest meetup. This is wild.
We were just saying that in person or not, this is probably our biggest meetup. So it turns out that everyone's just really lazy. Just kidding.
Virtual meetups are awesome.
Right. We're gonna do this more often then. Maybe we'll do some iteration and do this again pretty soon. But we will also I will start the video process, which should take 3.5 days to upload due to my crap internet. But once that is in, I will message all of you guys. And yeah, I will see all of you guys on the Slack. Sound good? Yeah. Guys, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Bye, Ernie.
Thanks, everybody. Peace
Back
out.
real soon. Real soon.
All right, guys. Take it easy.